Hi guys, XtraTalk here. We have three very special guests actually. Marc, everybody knows Marc. Welcome back, Marc. A Kudus debate today. You have to be here. We all know. I mean, if people wouldn't know you, they would think maybe you're his agent or maybe he's, like he paid you to be his, I don't know, like telling all good stuff about him on Twitter and these kind of things. But we'll talk about that in a minute. And Oracle from Ghana. Good to see you. Good to have you as well. Sports data journalist. Almost as famous as Kudus in Ghana. Almost.
Thank
and
you.
Roy, welcome. Roy on Twitter is notorious for being Mr. Salty. So let's see how he will behave today. Welcome, Roy.
I'll do my best.
All right. Guys, before we start the debate, I have two questions. One for Oracle. Oracle, I have a question for you, right? Because, of course, Kudus is from Ghana. You're from Ghana as well. When did you hear about Kudus for the first time? Do you remember? And can you tell us a little bit on how he's perceived in Ghana? Maybe give us a little bit of understanding, because he's far away, of course, and he's playing here. And we're seeing him at Ajax. But before that, we really didn't know him that well. So can you give us a little bit of feedback on that or background on that?
So let me start off with how I found out about Kudus. The thing is, I won't lie. He wasn't probably the next big thing, especially when he was playing for the under-17s and the under-20s. So you take a look at the under-17 team, which underperformed. He wasn't really the star of the team, and it was difficult to even pick one player out of that crop because none of them really took the opportunity. A number of them made some pretty poor career decisions. And so that's just background. He really shot to the limelight through Right to Dream, where he was part of the first group who moved from Ghana to Nordjylland in Denmark. And he really just took the opportunity. And it's just his unique playing style. And everyone just started hearing about this kid who is very fancy on the ball. And, whenever you hear of a left-footed player who dribbles, everyone just automatically compares him to Lionel Messi. And so you start to see such comparisons on the media. And I was like, who's this guy? Let me go check him out. And so I watched a couple of videos, saw how good he was, and started following his progress. And I knew he would be a big player because I think when he joined, I spoke to one coach, Didi Dramani, who is currently the assistant coach of the national team here. He was very, very influential and central to the development of Kudus because he followed him throughout Right to Dream to Nordjylland. And I remember I spoke to him even when Kudus joined Ajax, and he said one thing that I always keep in mind. He said, look, if any Ghanaian is to come close to a Ballon d'Or, I think it would be Mohamed Kudus. And I mean, for a coach to say something like that, that means that a kid has to be special. And so that's how I found out about Kudus and then started following him all around. In terms of how he's perceived in Ghana, back to the precedent that I set, if you look at the national team, especially in the Black Stars, the performance of the team has been largely dependent on how the preceding U teams fared. And so you look at the 2010 World Cup, we tapped a lot into the 20 team that won and the 2009 Africa Cup of Nations and then the World Cup as well. We sort of depended on those talents in the next 5, 6, 7 years. Now, there was a break in our talent development. And as I said, that under-17 team that Kudus found himself didn't really perform to the levels expected. So if you look at maybe their best lineup, only Kudus is a regular in the national team. None of them really find themselves even under 23 or none of the national teams. None of them really play in a top 5 European club. And so he's more or less like the pioneer for that group. And so people do remember him for that. He's, quote unquote, holding a whole generation in his own hands. And I mean, yeah, the likes of Kamaldeen Sulemana have come to join, but Kudus is like the only one that went through the ranks in terms of the national team. So he's seen as the next successor, the one that the national team would be built on and very central to how the team plays as well. So they're really high expectations. And when expectations are high, it leads to a lot of emotions as well. So he cannot afford to have a bad game, even at age 21. And that's just the situation that he finds himself being a talented player.
Do you feel he feels that pressure? Did you notice that? Or
Yeah, he does. He does. He really does. And if you interact with him, you would get to know that he's a very quiet, humble player. Just wants to play football. And I think you might have noticed in his first week in Ajax, you probably check the videos. He's always hiding in the corner. If everyone is dancing in the team, he's on the side. Yeah, that's the type of person that he is. But of course, when you are getting such huge expectations at a young age, where you move to a new country, settling without any friends around and all that, it's all tough. It can be really difficult, and people don't really consider that sometimes because it's the national team. You expect it to be ready once you're thrown in, and so people just expect him to play a good game all the time. And unfortunately, with his style of play, I feel sometimes the more that he tries, the more it doesn't succeed. And in the Ghana national team, for instance, where you would constantly see criticisms on Kudus has to pass that ball. He didn't need that extra 10. He didn't need that extra touch. But for him to prove himself that he is that good, that extra 10 gives him that confidence to try something more spectacular. And so that's probably the only bit that he has to work on. The fact that when he's trying to address some of these criticisms, he ends up overdoing the simple things. And he's young. It's expected of him. So I think, that's one thing that he can definitely work on as a player.
very insightful. Thank you so much, Oracle, for this one. Roy, your first time here. We have a tradition. You have to go through this as well. So you're an Ajax fan. We usually ask first-timers coming in, how did you become an Ajax fan? So can you give a little bit of brief background on this, and then I will ask you a question about Kudus.
All right, sure. Well, I became an Ajax fan at the age of 3, I guess. I went to the stadium with my dad and my grandfather, so pretty early on. I met a couple of players like Jari Liedmanen, and I've been sold to the club ever since. Had an Ajax bedroom when I was younger, posters on the walls, and your typical kid growing up as an Ajax fan, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, Kudus, right? We have a fan base that is a little bit split. He's been here for 2 years already. He has suffered quite a few injuries already, so we haven't seen his full potential yet. But there are still people. I don't know if you're part of those people, but we will find out. That are questioning whether Kudus will ever reach that level that everybody thinks he will at Ajax. Whether he's good enough even to be a first 11 player at Ajax. Where do you stand in this one?
Well, I think I'm one of the more critical fans. I've been watching his games and also his games at Young Ajax last year, and there are just a couple of points that I want to touch upon, but I will do later this stream, where I think that Kudus lacks for the Ajax style of play. And I'm not saying he won't succeed, but I'm more on the opinion that he might not succeed at Ajax. Might have a better, how do you say this, suitability for another club.
And why do you think so? Why do you think so?
Because at Ajax, it's all about split-second decisions. It's all about making that run at the right moment, giving a through ball, not making that extra touch, but playing the ball off to a player on the side and making sure that the rotation speed is high. And I think that's one of his biggest issues for me. He often keeps the ball with him too long, and we already lack spaces on the pitch. So he keeps the ball and other players start running, but the gaps get closed by defenders. And I think that's his main issue for our style of play.
All right. Okay. Point taken. Look, I have to come to the biggest fan basically on Twitter, almost the biggest fan on Twitter, perhaps. Marc, listen, we spoke about this before. I think a year ago we spoke about this. And you told me you didn't really know about him, but just before Ajax signed him, you saw him. You saw a clip of him and you were like, wow, this player, Ajax, perfect fit. In the course of these 2 years, I know I already mentioned injuries, etc., etc. Did your thoughts on Kudus change in the sense that you're becoming a little bit more doubtful whether he will fit in Ajax, yes or no?
The answer is yes, but only because of how things have progressed for him and because of the players that we've brought in, and now because of the perception that he has in the team, which I think has largely just skewed very negatively because of the injuries, because of maybe some relatively average-ish performances off the bench, and because of all the players that we've brought in. And I think at a certain point at Ajax, if you are not a youth player coming up, through the ranks, and we know you very, very well, at a certain point, these guys like Darami, for example, would be one of them who I think is just going to fade away because, he didn't really get an opportunity. Maybe he didn't really play super, super well. But eventually we just sign somebody else. We say, okay, it was kind of a failed experiment, and we move on. And we don't necessarily, give them another super fair opportunity. So I think because of that, I'm starting to get a tiny bit concerned. But from a technical and performance level, my faith in him has never wavered. And I think you see him, any opportunity that he's had a chance to play consistently, you always see the talent. Always. Anytime he's actually getting, 60 plus minutes, whether it's preseason, whether it's the Eredivisie, whether it's young Ajax, you always see it. The flashes of brilliance, the goals, he scores virtually every single time he actually plays extended minutes. And, I was just looking back at the statistics for this. Even last season, he started, I think, 5 or 6 games. He scored in 4 of them. Whenever he gets extended minutes, he's able to show what he can do. We just haven't been able to give him that, whether it's because Ten Hag didn't want to, or it's because of injuries. And I get it. Injuries suck. I think they're really frustrating. I think fans get on players way too unnecessarily for injuries, but I get it. They happen. And, at a certain point, you have to start wondering about his durability. But I just think he deserves one fair chance. And I think that if you watch him play in these preseason games, we saw it last year in preseason before he got injured as well. He has so much ability, and he gives us something that nobody else on our team gives us. And he's unique. You watch him play, he stands out from everybody else. We have Tadic, Bergwijn, Antony, Berghaus, everybody, all these incredibly, incredibly talented players. But when you watch us play, he stands out. I was watching our recent friendly game with one of my friends who, watches Ajax here and there, maybe in the big Champions League games. Immediately, he was like, who's this number 9 guy? Like, haven't really seen him play for you guys before. He just stands out because of his speed, his technique, his strength on the ball, his creativity. He's a fantastic talent. And I think that, for that, my confidence in him hasn't wavered personally. We'll see if circumstances at the club allow us to hopefully see that.
Can I ask you a question, Marc? Do you think not only the injuries, but also the fact that Ten Hag also didn't really help him in the sense that not only him, but a lot of other players as well, because he didn't rotate that much. We all know this story about Ten Hag, but he didn't get a lot of minutes also. So he kind of, in between those injuries, didn't have really time to get back to his old Kudus form. Do you agree on that?
Yeah, definitely. And I think Karu mentioned it. He's very much kind of shy. He's pretty reserved, and he plays largely based on his confidence in himself. At least that's how I see it. When he has the full confidence of the players around him and the coaching staff, aka he's starting games, he's getting more minutes, he's getting more comfortable, that's when he performs at his best. When he's in and out of the team, he plays for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, he feels like he almost has to, do more than necessary to show himself, in a good light. So he'll come in and he'll maybe try and do too much, and it's not really his normal style, but he just feels, okay, I have 15 minutes to do something. Like, I need to do something, as opposed to just playing his normal, natural game. And I think that at a certain point that weighs on players. If you're just getting 5, 10 minutes, 15 minutes once a week, next week you don't play, it's tough. It's mentally tough. It's like there's similar comparisons all over the world, really. I mean, Anthony Martial for a while when he was with Mourinho, he was out of the team. He was no longer a starter, and he'd just get like 10, 15 minutes every so often. And Mourinho would say, hey, like when Martial comes on, he doesn't do much. Well, it's tough to get into a rhythm and feel the need that you need to make an impact. You have to score a goal in 10 minutes or otherwise you're not going to play. So I feel for him in that sense. And I think that you're right, that chopping and changing and not really giving him opportunities to really start has hurt his confidence a little bit, and I think has hurt his ability to make an impact on the field in the limited minutes that he has gotten.
Yeah, understood. Orako, I had a question for you also, which is related more to, because sometimes on Twitter, even on YouTube, we get these angry people from Ghana, saying like, you guys don't value Kudus. He's far better than Klaassen. He's far better than Berghuis. What are you guys doing? You guys are mistreated. You guys don't like African players. We've heard everything. So my question to you is, do you pick up these noises as well? I mean, in Ghana, when you talk about Kudus, whether Ajax is a good fit for him or whether he should maybe go somewhere else?
Yeah, I do. At a point, Ghanaians probably thought, he had an issue with Ten Hag because I think he came back from injury way before Brobe did, and he never really got any significant moment in like minutes. And Brobe comes back from injury, and he's just thrown back into the fray. And so at a point, there were a number of Ghanaians who thought the coach had a problem with Kudus, and I think it's a prevailing theme, especially here, because they do know how much an important player that he is, especially to the national team. And the only way that he can develop or get better or stay in shape, especially with the World Cup coming up, is to have him play and, have him high in confidence. For instance, even when he wasn't getting enough game time, with Ajax, whenever he comes to Ghana, he was still showing some good signs. And even recently, in the past 2, 3, 4 games that we played, he scored the first goal when we played against Madagascar at home. He also got the first goal when we played against Central African Republic just 3 days later. And then in the Caribbean Cup, he was arguably our best player in those 2 games against Japan and, that final game that we won against Chile on penalties. And so people do see him as the next big thing. He's almost wrapped in rule. Like, people genuinely care about him because he is central to what this national team would become. And so it's a bit frustrating for Ghanaians when they don't even see the bare minimum. That's him playing some significant minutes as well. But of course, it goes 2 ways, and you need to understand that no manager wants to lose a game. Every manager wants to give himself the best chance to pick up all 3 points or to qualify or to win a game. And so if Kudus or the manager perceives Kudus as part of a system that would give himself the best possible chance, then he would. So I wasn't too hard on him. I just thought maybe it was more of sentiment for Ten Hag. The fact that he just cannot rely on you again. He cannot trust you again, because this was the same Ten Hag who trusted him so much when he came first, was starting almost every game, and even led that false 9 experiment against Liverpool in a big Champions League game. So the coach obviously had trust in him. But as humans, actions and circumstances determine how, the level of trust stays, whether it stays up or it could come down. And so unfortunately it came down, and it's understandable. But a lot of Ghanaians do see this preseason as a fresh start for him, a new coach who is basically coming in without any form of prejudice, any form of knowledge of any of the players. And so really it's just a whiteboard that has been handed to Kudus again for him to rewrite his time at Ajax. So a lot of Ghanaians are optimistic that he would be able to grab it this time.
Where do you, because you watch all the Ghana games, of course, in which Kudus plays, what is the role that is given to him in the national team? Maybe.
This is a very difficult question because I remember no one really knew of Kudus. He just came, I think his first game was against South Africa in one of the qualifiers about 3 years ago or so. And he came on for the last 10 minutes, and Ghana was already leading 1-0 through a Thomas Partey strike. It was at Cape Coast. And then we had a counter-attack. Mohamed Kudus driving with the ball, gets close to the penalty box. And then there's a captain, Andre Ayew. I don't know whether you know of Andre Ayew, but he's played in the Premier League. He, even beyond the captainship, he's probably the most influential player in the dressing room in the past 5 years. So for Andre Ayew to be on the side screaming for a pass and Mohamed Kudus ignoring him and shooting with his weaker foot to score, that was when a lot of people were like, who is this guy? Because usually no one would ignore Andre Ayew in that situation, especially for a young player who just popped up. And so from then, everyone just elevated how, they saw Kudus. And from then, it's been the question of, is he a number 10 or number 8? So I've spoken to some of his youth coaches, at Right to Dream, where unfortunately I think this is where his biggest weakness could come in. No one can really tell exactly what his best position is. It's never a definite answer. So I think yesterday I texted one of the guys at Right to Dream that, hi, during Kudus' time, he came there when he was 12, played to 16. What do you think his best position was? That's a tough one. I think he was either an 8 or a 10. I asked Didi Dramani, assistant coach of the Black Stars. I think he's brilliant. He can play anywhere across the front four. You look at his first game for Nordjylland where he moved from Right to Dream, and he was used as a striker in the false 9 role. He stayed at Nordjylland for a few months, played across the front four. And the thing is, wherever he plays, he would have some significant impact. And so you would think you can still use him there. So I think that's the hardest thing to tell. Personally, I'm torn between the 8 or a 10. I think both positions come with the pros and cons. If he's in a deeper area, I feel there's less pressure on the ball. He's able to lift up his head, and going past attacking players is not as difficult as when you are high up the pitch and you have to face more physical defenders. So he's able to progress the ball a lot more when he's in deeper areas, and he's able to dictate play. I think he played there under Ten Hag in the beginning, where you could see those fancy tents around the center circle and you could drive the ball forward and all that. But the thing about Kudus is, in the number 10 role, he's also a goal or assist machine, because you look at the numbers that he's averaging for the Black Stars, and almost every 2 games he's either getting a goal or assist, especially when you play him high up on the pitch. And so it's difficult, and it's a question that he may have to sit down and decide that this is my best role, because we've seen versatile players not have the best of careers, because if the situation of all 10 outfield players are specialists in their role, then where does that leave you? Because you're not really sure you're an 8 or a 10. And so I think a lot depends on the player. He's still 21, that's good. But it's a decision that he would have to start making soon. Personally, I think the number 10 in football is not really fancied anymore across the number of systems that you see the best coaches in the world use right now. So I would want him to focus more on the number 8, where you see a lot more of the ball and he can influence play from there. So this is a personal opinion. I just think he's better as an 8. I don't know whether maybe Roy or Marc would have a different view on that.
I'm going to give it all to Roy first, because Roy can go all out now and say what he thinks. And also maybe, Roy, tell us a little bit. I mean, you can dive into the weaknesses and tell us, because you said you don't think he's an Ajax player. He doesn't fit the Ajax system. Maybe you can also rank him in terms of compared to the other players, on the midfield. Let's start with the midfield first, and we'll talk about the other positions, because he's been used in other positions as well. So go ahead.
All right, sure. Well, last year you had Gravenberg on the 8 position, so that was a totally different type of player. I think Gravenberg is a player with more tactical overview. Gravenberg knows where the space is. He drives into the space and then he delivers that ball. I do think Kudus has a better finishing shot. He has a better shot on target. And I have to admit that I think that Kudus has the better view for the assist when he gets into the small spaces. But the problem with Kudus in the Ajax system for me is that when he runs, he often puts his head down. He leans forward and he puts his head down, and then he runs into trouble. And he's very good in duels and fighting for the ball, so he can recover pretty quickly. But the moment he runs into another player, play stops. So everyone is fixed in position, the game turns static, and he fights his duel. He does have the ball, but he only has one way to go, which is back. And that leads to situations at Ajax where we already have to battle for small spaces. We just don't have the time. We need to move quickly with the ball. And that's my main issue with him. And I do think he's better in a 10 position now with a striker like Tadic in front of him. Because Tadic is not an Allaire type of striker. He drops in more, so Kudus can make that deep run. So he can use his speed in a better way. And he does have the speed, and he does have the technical ability to actually get the ball, run into the box, and shoot. So that's pretty amazing actually to have. I'm just wondering how he will fit into Schreuder's system, because I think Schreuder is pretty different from Ten Hag from what I've seen so far. Also, his games I've seen at Club Brugge. I think Ten Hag is more focused on having an actual target man, and I think Schreuder is more likely to use a striker that can drop and swap with the guy in the 10 position, and I do see a bigger role for Kudus there.
That wasn't that salty.
That wasn't that salty at all. No,
man. What's that, man? That was not part of the deal, bro. What are you doing? No. But all right, Marc. In general, look, we're talking about the past a lot, and we've covered Kudus a couple of times. Going forward, right now, right? I think I saw a tweet from you not so long ago. I think a few days ago, in which the main thing, apart from, of course, he has to stay healthy, is that we have so many choices now up front. Where does this help Kudus? Where does he fit in? Where will we use him? For this Ajax. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, it's tough because it's like, to Roy's point, I think we probably see him as a more advanced player. And I think because of some of the reasons that Roy mentioned, that sometimes he maybe takes a few too many touches, maybe sometimes he doesn't have the perfect sort of spatial awareness in deeper areas, that we feel that we can almost like trust him to play a little bit deeper, where if you lose the ball, all of a sudden they're attacking at our goal much closer. I think we maybe feel sometimes if we play him a little bit further forward and he's maybe a little bit silly or a little bit clumsy on the ball, it's not going to be as meaningful because, we have our 8s behind us and we're a little bit more secure. So I think that's probably some of the logic of playing him a little bit higher. But he's a tricky player to assess because it reminds me of Frankie a little bit in different ways, whereas Frankie, for a long time, we didn't know whether he was a 6 or an 8 or a 10 also, because he was so technical, he was so talented, he was so good on the ball, but he wasn't great, at scoring necessarily. He took way too many touches also. That was a criticism for him for a long time as well. He's a little bit like lazy defensively, like he's not the best positionally ever. So it was a similar type of debate, just a little bit different. So now with Kudus, he's so good at goal scoring. He has as Orukaru said, he has a great knack for goal scoring, and we've seen it in preseason. When he plays, he generally scores, or at least he's getting chances. But where I think he has the most use to us is deeper, because what we're going to lose big time this season without Lisandro Martinez and without Gravenberch is that ability to really progress the ball comfortably through high-level opposition teams. And what I think is going to happen, again, depends on how good Bassi ends up being on the ball, depends how good Wijndal is at actually progressing play. I think he's very good higher up the field. I don't know he's not going to be as good at Blint at progressing the play from deeper areas in left back, because we're not going to play Blint there. And I think we're going to struggle a little bit more progressing the ball forward, which I think is going to start showing Alvarez's flaws a little bit more, where he's not actually very good on the ball, but we're going to need him to be, especially in the bigger games. And this is always the context. I don't care about Fortuna Sittard and all that stuff. Yeah. In the bigger games.
Yeah.
And I think that's where Kudus can have a huge impact, because he's so strong and he's so good at dribbling that he's very press resistant. And we saw that in those very early games under Ten Hag, where he was the deepest midfielder and he's turning away from pressure in tough games. Vitesse with 10 men for virtually the entire half, and they couldn't get near him. Could not get near him. He's so quick. He understands where pressure is coming from to turn out of it, and he's so strong. He holds the ball so well. And I think that's where he can be a huge Frankie-like impact to our team of helping us progress from deeper areas alongside someone like Taylor. And I think that eventually we will realize that our midfield's a little bit thin. We have Taylor, we have Alvarez, and that's really about it in the midfield as it stands right now, other than maybe moving Blint a little bit farther forward or potentially moving Klaassen back, which no one wants to do. And we have so many attacking options at the other side, with Berghaus as a 10. If Ihatara never comes back, as a 10. Tadic could play as a 10. Then you have Anthony. Now you have Brobbey. I think there's just too many players that need to play in further areas that we should focus more on, hey, let's develop Kudus into this 8 position where we actually have a need, because we haven't signed anybody there. We have a need for it. If one of Taylor or Alvarez gets hurt, suspended, who's really the next person up? No one really knows. I would start focusing on playing Kudus in that number 8 role, because I think that's where he can have the most impact for us, and it's where we actually have a need. So I'm not optimistic that we're going to do it based on what I've seen in preseason so far. But I hope that eventually, out of necessity, which was a very common thing during Ten Hag's reign, is someone gets injured and we need to come up with a new sort of creative solution. Maybe at one point or another, Alvarez starts performing poorly, or there's an injury or a suspension or something, and then Kudus gets dropped back into the 8 role. Because ultimately, I think if he can develop, as we think he can, at least me and Karu, that as an 8, he can truly be a transcendent talent, because he has the tools. He has them. And I know that he's not perfect. Roy correctly pointing out some of his flaws, and I think he has some too. But I think when you see the tools, the speed, the quickness, the strength, the dribbling ability, the passing ability, the incisiveness, the willingness to go forward, he ticks all of those boxes that you want your like world-class center midfielders to do. So I hope that we just give him a chance to do it, because we saw it fleetingly for 2 games. But to me, like, those games just are still so clear in my mind, because even to me, those were at a higher level than I've seen Gravenberg play, in my opinion. And it was 2 games. It was a super small sample size. It wasn't in the Champions League or anything like that. But those 2 games, the level that I saw from him, wow. So hopefully that's what we can get back to.
Roy, it's a bit contradictory to what you said, basically, because Marc is saying, I see a role for him, and he made some good points, playing a little bit deeper. And you're saying, looking at his flaws, looking at the things he has to develop still, I think he has more, he can be more of use for Ajax up front. Or do you also agree a little bit with Marc? Because you're agreeing a little bit more with us now. So maybe I can ask you this question.
I don't think he should play on the 8th position. I think he lacks the spatial awareness to play on the 8th position at Ajax, especially when we're being pressed. And I do imagine that with the new winger and if Anthony stays, hopefully Anthony on the other side, that we have more depth in our play. So I do think that the midfield should be pressed back a little further, and I don't see Kudus in a role where he excels in the spaces where he doesn't get to go up front all too much. I think his qualities really lie in making that combination play, giving that short pass, receiving the ball, and then going for goal. I think it's a lack of his, you're wasting his qualities, basically. That's my opinion.
Oracle, do you agree? Go ahead, Marc. I will go to Oracle.
I was going to say, it's a fair point, and it's a tricky one, because I think he's such an exceptional player around the box. I mean, we saw that in the multiple times, but in the couple preseason games, I mean, he had that one when he gets it on the edge of the box, he easily beats somebody and he thrashes the ball off the post, nearly a fantastic goal. He is so good around the box that I do understand the sentiment of maybe it's a little bit of a waste, and then maybe, you wouldn't want to restrict that ability for him to get forward. So I do agree in that sense. I just think based on our team's composition and where he can actually be most useful to us, given the depth that we have at the 10 and on the right side and up front now with Robbie and Tadic as your 9s, I just think if you really want him to be, helpful to us, I just see the role more as an 8. And I think that hopefully, the criticisms that you mentioned, the spatial awareness, I get it. I would hope that maybe with some repetition and some coaching that you could, alleviate some of those concerns a little bit. So that would be my only counterpoint, is that I get the issues that he might have as an 8, but hopefully, coach them out of them. That's what Schroeder's there for, you would hope.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. I wanted to ask actually, Oracle, whether did you see Kudus play a more reserved, more defensive role with Ghana or any other team before? Because that's a question I have for myself. Like, he could play deep, but I feel like he's a little bit more the same as Taylor. I think they're like the same prototype in the sense that they want to carry the ball, they want to go up front, they want to be creative, they want to be at the box of the opponent. And we saw last time also that Taylor made a goal, So I think Kudus has a little bit of the same naturally, but at the same time, and I'm stretching it a little bit too much, Marc is making a good point as well. I think one of the concerns of the Ajax fans, Roy can also admit to that, is that Alvarez is very unique. We don't have a backup for Alvarez, basically. And a lot of fans are like, especially when we go against Champions League games and these kind of things, if something happens to Alvarez, who can really replace him? Who comes close in terms of ability, quality, all these kind of things to be able to replace Alvarez? Some people think maybe Taylor can do it. I don't know. Some people think maybe Kudus can do it. My question is, can Kudus be that guy? Or are we, like we're saying right now, restricting him too much because he's much better in the attacking area?
I think the good thing is he's just 21, and reorienting yourself to play as a 6 or an 8 or a 10 or whichever one he chooses, I think shouldn't be too much of a problem, considering the fact that he's at Ajax, and the most important thing is how good you are on the ball, which I think he already has. And so once that decision has been made, I think, yeah, he would have a bit of flaws that, as Marc said, just needs to be polished and trained out of him. For instance, one thing that I don't think has been touched on so far about his weaknesses is the fact that if you play him in a deeper area, I focus on him a lot during games. And sometimes when opponents have the ball and he has to do some defensive duty, it's almost as if he zones out. And it's very common with a lot of players, who love to hold on to the ball, because the thing is, for players who love to dribble and hold on to the ball, they exert so much energy and stamina. So whenever, at any moment on the pitch, they're trying to conserve their energy. So you can see the likes of someone like Lionel Messi walking a lot when he doesn't have the ball. It's not because they're lazy, but because of the amount of energy that they use whenever they have the ball. You see Kudus getting a lot of duels, trying to dribble 1-2 players and move the ball forward a lot. That requires a lot of stamina. And it's just how football is. Players can never really have both of those abilities. So if you want to play him in a deep area, then he has to be defensively aware. I think that's the major traits that he has to pick up, because at the moment, he only switches on really when his team has the ball. So that's either Ghana or Ajax. And he's brilliant at that. But does he have that awareness to realize, oh, there's this huge potential danger coming in if I don't pick the opponent up who's making a run? And that's really the aspect that you'd have to polish on if he is to go into a deeper area. But for me personally, I never really want to impose my thoughts on his position because I still think he's young. At 21, you don't want to miss out on the huge potential that he has, because he had to forego some skills and learn a new position that he wants to play. I would love to hear from him. My favorite position is XYZ. I don't think he's ever had an interview where he's spoken of that. Maybe he had, and I've missed out on it. But that's the one thing that I'm looking out for him to say that I want to play at number 10. It's almost similar to the Gabriel Jesus situation at Man City, where he never really said, I want to play as a number 9. I want to fight with Aguero for a spot. And he's always like, okay, you want to play me wide? I can do that. I can do a decent job. So it's almost as if you are never really the primary choice in any position. You're just around for situations. Okay, the number 8 is not around, he could deputize there. The number 6 is not around, he could deputize there. So I'm just waiting for that moment where he says enough is enough. I want to play as a 6. I want to play as a number 8 or number 10 or a false 9 or whatever it is. And then he just focuses on that, works towards that, and competes for that exactly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Moving from the more defensive role, we've seen an experiment, we already touched upon it, like Kudus is being used now as a number 9. Roy, is this something for you that might work? Are you positive about maybe using Kudus as a false 9, as an extra option?
I actually did like him in the role he played in that match, but I do think it's not a sticker, because we have a situation where Broby is coming in, and we have Tadic, and Tadic has to play, and Bergwijn has to play. So that's the 2 slots that Tadic fits in. You have the striker position and you have the left wing position. So I do think Tadic will play as a striker. So I think this will stay with an experiment. But I did like what I saw. So it was pretty decent actually. Good combination play and pretty great.
Would you scratch your head and think maybe, you know what? Maybe we don't need to go and buy that second, third striker because we have that option? Or are you, no, we need another striker as well?
No, I'm fine with the striker options we have. So I don't think we need another one, and especially with the players I've seen passing the lists on Twitter.
Doesn't excite you?
No, it doesn't excite me too much. So, but yeah, from what I've seen so far, I think he would be a decent option as a third striker. So,
do you agree, Marc, on this one?
I mean, I've always liked him, frankly, anywhere. I mean, I remember when he first signed, all the first sort of videos that I saw of him in Denmark, he was generally playing as a striker. So that's sort of like where he first caught my eye, and the ability, again, to hold players who are coming from behind him and turn, make things happen, and then obviously his nose for goal. Again, it's a little bit, I mean, my family is actually, maybe not my dad, but me and my brother are the champions of the Kudus fan club. And the first thing my brother texted me when Brobbey was signed was, "I'm happy, but it means another position where Kudus can't get minutes." So that's kind of my thought as well. It could have been nice, if there had maybe been some sort of sticking point with Leipzig and we ended up not getting Brobbey. I think Kudus would have been a fantastic option as basically the second striker to Tadic, but he would get a lot more minutes because he could come in basically as the first sub, and then you play basically like a Kudus Tadic front two in a way, and you have them working off each other. So that would have been very nice to see. Unfortunately, I agree with Roy. I just don't see it anymore. Tadic is going to play there most games, and then when he doesn't play there, it's probably going to be like a combination of like a Brobbey Tadic front two or something like that, which is fair. I mean, Brobbey's fantastic. Love him as well. Hope he gets the minutes. And again, that's why, based on the personnel that keeps coming into the club, which I love, I'm all for it. Let's make ourselves the Manchester City of the Netherlands. Like, go for it. I just do hope that or I hope that because of this, we recognize, hey, like Kudus is super, super, super talented. We have so many players in the attacking positions now. He is the only one out of all these attacking players who has proven to us in the past that he can play as a deeper number 8. We've seen it with our own set of eyes. We know he can do it. Let's give him some more chances to play in that role, whether it's easier games to start the season, Fortuna, Otto, Willem II, all of these games, just give him a chance, see what he looks like, because ultimately we're going to have to do that, because with the amount of players that we have now, if we don't rotate, I mean, there's going to be a mutiny. I mean, all these players that we have in the squad that are now like expensive, high-priced signings, you can look across virtually the entire field. Bassi has just come in for 25 million or something like that. We already have Daley Blint. We already have Timber. We already have Vindal. I mean, there are going to be people who are upset if they're not playing. So hopefully this idea of rotation gets built into the squad early, and everybody on the team understands that if we want to be as good as we have been the past 2 seasons in October, as we are in February, we know that we need to rotate more. So hopefully because of that, we start to see more of a role for Kudus, and hopefully it's in that, deeper role, because that's where we do have a gap. So as much as I did like him as the 9, I like him anywhere, but I think to Roy's point, I don't see it happening other than, really bad injury issues or something like that.
Yeah. Marc, I want to stick with you. I want to ask you a direct question, right? And it's also for the people that maybe are not on Twitter, or maybe they are on Twitter and they see you all this, like positivity about Kudus week in, week out. If he basically just touches the ball, you're like ecstatic and all these kind of things. Just objectively, I mean, I'm questioning right now, what is it about him that sets him apart? If you can mention this. I mean, you touched upon it a little bit at the beginning and also in previous videos, but what sets him apart for you compared to the other Ajax players? Because at Ajax, as you know, everybody is very technical. Everybody is good. Everybody has their own set of qualities. And I had this discussion myself a couple of days ago, and I told you about this as well. Like, some people are like, yeah, but he doesn't defend like Alvarez. And Oracle also touched upon this. He doesn't have one specialty. He can do a lot of things. Taylor has been doing very well lately as a number 8, especially at the end of the season. So, he has to maybe compete with him. And then you have on the number 10 position, I mean, you have so many options basically. So what sets him apart for you that you're like, this guy deserves to play? Because you've mentioned before, he is too good not to play in this Ajax team. So can you make a case about this? Can you just objectively, because some people think, you know what, you're not being serious. You're just thinking around about Kudus. So can you step back and say, okay, in all fairness, this is it.
First of all, imagine thinking I'm never not serious on Twitter. Come on, most serious app there is. No, but to be quick on this, what I generally look for in the players that are coming through the youth academy or the players that were linked to sign is, are you like different? Are you unique? And do you profile as a player that I could envision playing in a Champions League final? I've talked about this before, and I know it sounds a little bit silly coming from an Ajax perspective of will we ever really get there? But hey, we were close. And ultimately, that's where I want to be. So I'm always looking for players that I think project as a potential sort of Champions League final level player. You see that like right away with a guy like Antony. I saw that right away with a guy like Lisandro Martinez. You see him on the ball, you see him defensively, you're just like, this guy, he translates. He could play at Manchester City if he develops in the way that we think he can. With Kudus, it was one of the first things that I saw. You don't need to see it for more than 10 minutes, in my opinion. The combination of his speed, his quickness, his strength, his technical ability, first and foremost. I don't want to emphasize the physical traits because to me, it's the technical stuff that's most important. But the technique, the speed, the creativity, the vision, the goal scoring ability, and when he wants to, his ability defensively, because he's so quick and he's so strong, he can win the ball back very, very easily when he chooses to. Those are just traits that are different. Those are the traits that you want. If you have that entire package, there's not much more that you can really be good at. And it's a guy like Kenneth Taylor, who I think is fantastic. I don't necessarily see, him progressing to that next level because maybe he's not, a superb athlete. He's a good athlete, but he's not great. His range of passing is good, not great. His ability to score goals is good, not great. It's hard to really see him projecting as a guy who might eventually sign for like Manchester City or something like that, even though I think he's very, very good. Whereas I think with Kudus, you can see it in bursts. There's little moments where you're just like, wow, that is different. And the player that I compare him to, who was also very controversial, I also caught a lot of flack on this on Twitter for a long time, was Serginho Dest, who even to this day has not really come into his own at Barcelona. But I think it was a very similar case where people were so focused on his negative qualities that they overlooked how special and unique he was. Seeing a fullback with like that type of quickness, speed, technique, dribbling ability, like that's what the top clubs in Europe are looking for. And I get that he had his issues and defensively, sometimes he switched off and all that stuff. And, I don't think he was maybe better than Mazraoui, but he had that ability. And so I always wanted him to play because I knew that those are the traits and the qualities that the top sides want. And that's what I see with Kudus. And it's like, whether or not he gets there, I don't know. But I do know that we should try, because I do think that if we don't and he ends up leaving and he goes somewhere else, he could unlock those abilities elsewhere. So I just would like us to try so that way we don't eventually let him leave, which I hope he does if he doesn't get more minutes this season, because he's too good to keep staying in the same position that he is. I just don't want us to have regrets if he ends up, being like a fantastic player somewhere down the line, knowing that we never gave him a proper chance. So to me, it's just those attributes you just see. Like you see this guy play and you're like, oof, like that's special.
Roy, you're looking very serious and you're looking a bit angry, maybe even at Marc. So look, do you agree with him? And I want to ask you another question as well. There were some Ajax fans who were at the start of the transfer window were thinking maybe it's not a bad idea to consider, not to do it, but maybe consider selling Kudus. Are you one of those fans or are you not one of those fans?
I have been one of those fans, yes.
Blasphemy, man. Okay, we're stopping this video right now. No, but okay, can you explain why?
Well, mostly because I didn't think he was going to get a real chance at the Ajax squad. I see him as a rotation player for Ajax right now, and I think he would excel in another club. And that's the reason where I'm like, well, I know it's a waste of talent, but I just don't see it happening at Ajax. And that's my main point with it. And I thought maybe it was easier to buy another midfielder who was maybe a little bit more experienced to fill in that role behind Alvarez and Taylor, because we already had so many players for the 10 position. But yeah, this preseason pretty much turned me around on it. I do want to see him, but I do want to see him more up front this season. I really hope he gets chances on the 10 position, maybe as a false 9. I want to see him excel in those roles, and it does look like in that role, he can be very, very special for us because he does have qualities that we lack. And I've been reading some scouting reports because of this XtraTalk, and a couple of things stood out to me, and all the reports mentioned the same two things, and it was also something small that I noticed. It's that they all mention a lack of concentration and a lack of discipline, and that's not in the sense that he's a player that often gets cards or makes fouls, but it's more in the sense that when you have a team playing in a very tactical lineup and everyone has to hold their position, I see Kudus as a player that makes the run and creates a gap that someone else has to fill, and maybe with now just Alvarez and not Martinez, pivoting around the midfield position, I think that may be an issue. Because I see Kudus making a run. There's a gap now on the left. Who fills that void? Who fills those spaces? Because Wijndal is also moving up front. So that's something I was also thinking about, the concentration and the discipline aspect on the tactical side.
Yeah, tactical discipline. Yeah, exactly. Okay, I understand. One thing though, one argument that was brought up, and I want to ask you this as well, is that don't forget how young he is and that he can still be molded into, becoming a better player, especially if he gets, like Marc said, he gets like a string of a couple of games, because how many times did we see Kudus play 5, 6, 7 games in a row? I don't think it happened so far up to this point. So shouldn't we think, what, we're being too harsh? And I know he's been injured and all these kind of things. We're not blaming anyone else. But how much can we say, what, let's see first what he does when he plays these games, and not 10 minutes or 5 minutes, like Marc said, but maybe a little bit more. And then we can have a judgment like, okay, is he progressing? Is he doing the things that we want him to do at Ajax? How much do you buy into that?
Well, I do, because he didn't really have a real shot at Ajax. Let's be reasonable about this. His first season, he had a couple of games, and then he got injured, was out for most of the rest of the season. Then he had a good preseason, got injured again. So he played some games with young Ajax, but that team is just talented players and some less talented players. And it all depends on.
And it's always changing, also in terms of.
Always changing, yes. So you cannot really make a judgment on the minutes he makes at young Ajax. And I think he's been a bit unlucky last year at Ajax, the senior team as well, because when he came into matches, either the game was already set or Ajax was leaning back and he had to take on a more defensive role. Let's see.
All right, let's see. Oraku, I wanted to ask you something. I don't know if you know this or you have an answer to this, but I was just wondering, because you have some sources, of course. In those 2 years, right? And in those 2 years, most of them he was injured. We know all these 3 injuries that he got. Did he get because he wasn't injured before? I checked that also with fans from Noord-Holland. He was never injured there. It was his first serious injury when he got to Ajax. What was his mental state? I mean, did you hear anything about that? And also, where do you think he stands in terms of, is he still very determined to prove himself at Ajax? Or did that ever go away? Or was he questioning himself? Did he doubt himself at any point? Can you tell us a little bit about that? I don't know if you know the answer. I'm just grasping at straws here a little bit, but maybe you have something for me.
Well, one thing about Kudus is, despite the fact that he's very humble and quiet, he is very spiritual, and he believes in God, and so that's one thing that he's lived his life upon, and he believes that he has a supreme being who supersedes everything, who just wants the best for him, and so anything bad happens to him, he sees in the light that it's just a learning opportunity for him. Because if you look at where he came from, where he was born, it's so difficult out there to be able to even make a living, for you to play professional football. Now you look at Right to Dream, every year they scout just about 20 players from tens of thousands of prospective young players who want to play football. And so throughout his life, he's always believed that he was born for this, and this supreme being always wants the best for him. And so if he's gone through all of these challenges, And even at Right to Dream itself, the success rate of becoming a top player or heading into maybe top 6, top 7, top 8 European leagues is really low. And so for him to still make that climb shows that he has that resilience at heart. And for him personally, what he said was that this was just a learning experience for him, a chance for him to really reconnect himself and find out that there's actually more life to football. All his life, he's been playing football, both amateur, professionally, or unprofessionally. And so for 3-4 months, he couldn't play anymore. And it was just an opportunity for him to reconnect. But the most important thing for him personally was the fact that he knows it was just an opportunity for him to learn. And what he's done is that he's learned from that experience. I think it's made him tougher as a player because, as you rightly mentioned, during his time at Northland, he never really had any injuries. And to him, he thought football is a perfect role. He just go out and play always. He always wants the ball and wants to dribble no matter how many times he's fouled. Now he would be a lot more intelligent when he's heading into dangerous situations because he's now been exposed to the fact that injuries could happen. And so I think it's been a learning experience for him in terms of where he stands in his Ajax journey. It's never really changed. He loves at the club, how he's been treated and how he's been welcomed. And I think just the faith put in him alone from the onset, a 5-year contract given to a young player that no one really knew about. And so he wants to repay the club and he wants to do well. You can see that excitement from, snippets of preseason videos where you could see him dancing, and he's basically excited at the opportunity that he could play again and have, the impact that he wants to, because deep down, he knows how good he is. Trust me, he knows he's a fantastic player. And he also understands that his self-belief and self-confidence is not matching that of Ajax at the moment. And he's had a taste of that, where at the beginning of his Ajax career, he wasn't just revered in the team, but he was actually making team of the week in the league. And he was going at a rate where he could have even finished as the top assist maker, where he had like 3 assists in 3 consecutive games and all that. So he knows how good he can be. And he wants to taste that feeling again, where Ajax depended on him and needed him. And so I think he's determined. But of course, criticisms and all these insults and stuff get to these players, and they all handle it differently. And I know he's had his fair share of abuse. He may not talk about it, but football fans nowadays are quite rough. But I think the most important thing is he's accepted the good feedback, and I think he's ready for the new season. He's really just hoping for the best, especially with the World Cup coming up, where he would be playing a really huge role in the national team. That's why he really wants to stay fit.
All right. Thank you, Oraku. Thank you, Marc. Thank you, Roy. Just to know one thing from Marc and Roy before we wrap up this video. Marc, will you be a little bit less positive going forward?
No, because you forget that I'm on Kudus's payroll, so I have to keep up I have to keep up the positive messages.
Okay.
No, but never. I hope he does great this season. I think he should. He's starting off really well. Hopefully, we reward him with minutes coming up in the first few games. Give him a chance. But if not, if it doesn't work out, similar to everybody, all the players on our team, I'm used to them coming and going. So I hope that if it doesn't work out for him here, that he does eventually leave, because I wouldn't want his career to be sort of stifled by us not playing him. And at this point, I do get it, because we have a lot of talented players. It's hard to get into this team now. It's approaching the point where it almost seems like his opportunity has come and gone just a little bit. But I really hope that just because of how good he plays, and over the next couple weeks, that we're forced to keep playing him, because as you know, nothing would make me happier than seeing him succeed here. So fingers crossed.
Yeah. All right. And Roy, for you, same question but a little bit different. So you said okay, based on the preseasons, I shifted a little bit more positively. Is it now 50-50? Do you think Kudus has a 50-50 chance this season, or are you more still in the salty, area?
I'm always in the salty area, you know that. Well, no, for me it's more 40-60. I do think that if he gets a fair shot and he excels, he will make it at Ajax. But I don't think he will get that shot. I think that's the whole issue. I think with Alvarez and Taylor, the midfield positions are pretty much set, and we have so many options on the 10 position, and so many big players that have to play, that it will be very difficult. Very difficult.